Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of School Life Unpacked with me, your host, Natasha Curtis-Ego. Today I have the privilege of having a wonderful moment to have a conversation with a repeat guest who came on before, discussing something slightly different this time. If you could take a moment to introduce yourself, that would be amazing.
Sure. Frank McEvoy.
Hello, welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
No, thank you for coming. I thought it would be a beautiful opportunity for us to discuss, because you were a head teacher and you've been in this industry for many years and you're still active in education. It would be lovely to discuss a little bit about your history, what you've learned, and impart some wisdom and sort of open the back door of what it was like for us.
I'm not quite sure how far we'll get there with that, but let's go.
Oh no, it's going to be wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. So if we go straight into it, if we look back over, if you tell us a little bit about your history, just to get us, for the people listening.
Well, I suppose I started getting interested in the idea of teaching when I was in the sixth form at school. And they used to have a habit of prefects were given the task of looking after a class while a teacher who was absent they found a replacement. So I found myself in front of classes, not frequently, but certainly on a regular basis. And I just remember one day I was looking after a maths class, and I think it was something like a year 9 or something like that. And I used to just come in the class and just say to the kids, "What are you doing then?" And they used to say, "Oh, we've got so-and-so." I said, "Well, get your books out. Look as though you're going to do something." And so they used to do that. And I had a little bit of a conversation about what they were working at. And I'm not a maths teacher by any stretch of the imagination. And I say, "Well, let's have a go at starting, and it'll make a good impression when the teacher turns up." And they all seemed to go along with it. And they were all working away. And then a teacher came in and said, "Where's Mr. X?" And I said, "Oh, he's not here today. We're waiting for a replacement." He said, "Blimey, your class is quieter than it is normally." So he said, "You ought to take up the idea of teaching." So it just sort of, that was a bit of a joke really, but it's just sowed the idea that actually I could relate to other pupils and get on with them and relate with them. So that sort of sowed the seed for a few years later,
Oh, that's exciting. So it was just that one moment that kind of, that little moment that just planted that seed.
Sowed
that
the
grew.
seed, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. You're suddenly thinking, yeah, well, actually, I can control a class and relate to people and get them working. So.
It's very young to know what you wanted to do, though. It's quite an early, career path choice.
Yeah, but purely accidental in the sense that you don't look when you're a teenager, you're not really looking about what you're going to do in your life, really. I think you're quite unusual if that happens. So it's a case of you find out things accidentally that you're good at, and then hopefully the path extends in the right direction.
In my opinion, I feel like teaching is a calling for people because it's a really challenging role. You have to have so many different, you have to be adaptable, you have to be able to think on your feet, you have to be relatable, and so I feel like it's a calling. It's not.
Yeah, I think if somebody told me how hard it was going to be, I wouldn't have gone down that direction at all. So it's just as well somebody didn't warn me off. Yeah.
So did you teach in primary schools or secondary schools?
Well, actually, I trained primary, secondary.
Okay.
I did a 4-year degree, and I applied for a primary school. And it was in the days where the local authority had control over teacher appointments, not schools. And so I turned up for an interview along with, there's probably 60 or 80 other people. I went into a room and the person opposite said, "Oh, I've looked at your CV and I see you've applied for a primary post." And I said I had, because I'd got on very well in primary school. And he said, "Well, actually, I've got a secondary post available for you here. It's an art post, an art teacher, and would you like it?" So he didn't actually offer me any primary posts. I think they had a list and thinking, right, we need to fill all these teaching posts, and that was it. So I said, yes, okay.
So you were an art teacher?
Yeah.
Oh, how was that?
Oh, it was lovely. Fantastic. In fact, most probably the nicest part of my career. I did 14 years in the classroom. I was very lucky in that the end of my first year, they lost the head of department and they gave me the job, offered me the job. So I had 3 classrooms. It was quite a busy art setup. One room was fine arts, one was pottery, and the other one was fabric. So we had 3 of us working. I ended up in the pottery room because nobody else fancied that. But I had actually done pottery at college, so that was okay. And it was like building a little cocoon of niceness, really, the art department. It was lovely. So all the children were in there working, beavering away.
And then when did you become a head teacher? Or
Right. Well, again, that's sort of accidental. I never even considered the idea of a head teacher's job until very late. So it was a case of I'm a bit of a busybody in the sense that I was always volunteering for things. So as soon as I started teaching, I was interested in the timetable and why I'd been given certain classes at certain times and all those sort of challenges. And it was a sort of, I don't know how you'd describe it really. I found myself getting involved in lots of, for instance, in those days, the timetable was done by hand, computerized these days. So it was the deputy head who was doing it, and he looked for a volunteer because somebody needed to write down every decision he made. But you learnt from the bottom up as to how timetables are constructed and why you need rooms and teachers and pupils and balance, etc. So it was interesting. So I found that quite a good challenge. And that's really what started me off. I then moved into looking after pastoral care of pupils. I got promoted as a senior teacher, etc., etc. So, yeah, it seemed to progress quite nicely. Now, I can't remember what it was, the late 90s, I think it was, we moved away from local authority control to school control. And that's when, if you like, I had the opportunity then to look at doing different things. So schools suddenly were in charge of their money and their planning and had decisions to make. So at that level, as a senior teacher, I got involved not just in the timetabling, but also the financial planning of the schools. So that, if you like, embedded me in the idea of looking at leadership within schools a bit more closely. So it was good.
What is the role of a head teacher in a school?
Well, good question, really.
Or what was it when you were there?
It's leadership.
Mm-hmm.
It's setting an example. I believed in leading by example. So if people needed to do playground duty, I'd be out there as well. If things needed to be done, then I would suggest it. I would do it first and then suggested other people followed. But leadership is, you have to try and inspire people to want to do their job well.
Okay.
And I think that's one of the secrets of being ahead. Your staff are very important. If you make good appointments for staff, your job is relatively easy. So
how do you do that though? How do you know what makes a good teacher?
Well, I think it's a gut reaction.
Okay.
It's an instinctive reaction.
Yeah.
I always, and I still do now, as soon as you meet somebody, I get an instinctive reaction and I sort of know whether that person's going to be okay in that job or not. I don't know why, but that's proved quite accurate. I don't know why, but it has. But it doesn't mean to say you're dismissive of people. Obviously, during interviews, you have to be fair and look at everything, but you do get a sort of reaction when you're talking to people about their skills and experiences and about what they want their vision for their teaching vision. And that's when you get that good vibe thinking, yes, I think that person's going to be okay.
It must be quite challenging because you have a team and then the new person's coming in and you've got to look at whether they'll fit in and whether they'll add to the harmony of a school or whether they'll shake it up. And
Well, I think you need a bit of both. You need a bit of challenge, but you also need teamwork.
Yes.
So a teacher without challenge most probably won't raise the standards in the classroom. So you need that. But at the same time, you need them to be able to get on with other people, be good listeners. And as you said at the very beginning, to relate well with both the pupils and the staff as well, their colleagues.
When you look back, what were the rewarding aspects of being a head teacher?
What did I get back?
Sorry, when you look back on...
Oh, when I look back, sorry.
On your career? What were the rewarding parts of being a head teacher? Was there anything that stands out?
I suppose it's when you meet former pupils. That's a good one. They often, people say, "Oh, hello, Mr. Mac, haven't seen you." How you and they tell you how they're getting on. They're proud of what they've done. They must probably, involved with the family. And they've got their own children. They've done, they've changed jobs and they've extended their careers, and they want to share that with you. But even when you meet people who haven't got that far, it's still good. I've always been pleased to meet former pupils. And it's always been quite rewarding. And I think that's one of the things that I've enjoyed the most on retirement. I can still bump into the odd one. I'm thinking back now, I've got to such an age where the youngest pupils I started teaching with, I was probably in their 60s now. So,
oh, wow.
So, yeah, I think I've calculated that right. Early 60s, maybe.
That's
Ancient,
a privilege. Yeah. No, it's a privilege that you can look back and you can reflect, and they've grown. I feel like school is such a big part of our lives, and we remember the good teachers, the bad teachers, the strict ones, and we remember the good head teachers. So it's wonderful that when you meet them, they remember you. And it's wonderful that they've also got to that age as well, And
surprisingly, sometimes I remember them. And they usually say, "Oh, I was really badly behaved. That's why you remember me, don't you?" Maybe that's true.
Maybe that's true. But I suppose everybody impacts, there's so many people, but they impact you differently. So with education, if we have a little reflection on that, would you say it's changed a lot over the last decade or so, and in what ways would you see that change?
Funny enough, I've had to think about this one quite a lot, because I'm always a positive person, glass half full, hopefully. So the things I think, the best things that have happened over my years are the abolition of corporal punishment, getting rid of the cane. That was mid-80s, I think, or something like that.
As late as that?
I think so, yeah. Don't hold me on that one, but edit that one out. It could have been late 70s, I'm not sure. But I do remember coming in, and there were quite a few staff who, depended on discipline by corporal punishment, and I was very much against that. So I never adopted that route. I think it created an element of fear and negativity, which is never good for learning. So it's one of those things that even if somebody did deserve to be punished for some reason or other, but that negativity, I don't think ever contributed anything to education. So having good order in the classroom doesn't necessarily mean good creative learning is taking place. And the other weird one, which I reflected on, is that Ofsted has had a good part to play in that they have emphasised, and you could say their record is, it could be up and down. But one of the good things they have, they from the very beginning, they talked about children being happy and children being safe, feeling safe and being safe. And to me, that is two big positives in any school community.
I agree with
if
you.
A child is happy, and if they feel safe and they are kept safe.
I was fortunate enough to do an early years conference a while ago, and one of the speakers mentioned children feeling safe and happy, and she said belonging, feeling like they belong in their environment. Yeah. And I felt like that is very, very important. And I didn't realize that school is so important for that sense of belonging.
Well, actually, the COVID years, a couple of years, actually illustrated just how important the idea of community, social skills that were lost during that time are still being felt at the far end of secondary education now. A lot of children lost their social skills, and people don't realise that it is a community of children learning and working together. It is very, very important. The negatives that I think over the years, to me, we call it the information age, but information overload, I think, is a big issue for adults as well as children. So if you're constantly looking at your phone, checking your emails, and if children actually are watching you as adults doing that, at home mainly, not at school, the idea of fake news
Yeah.
or misinformation, lies, then children having to try and make judgments as to what's happening is, I think, quite a challenge, and schools need to get involved in the idea of clarifying that and making life better for them.
That's really interesting you raised that, because I was speaking with Liz Keeble from St. Helens recently, and she mentioned the same thing. She was talking about empowering the students to be able to distinguish between where the information is coming from. Is it a reliable source? Who's saying it? Why are they saying it? Those kind of things, and giving children the tools to be safer if they happen to be online, because that's inevitable, but making sure that they are able to be safe and know where they can and can't be, and filtering that to the parents so that they know how to keep their children safe as well. So I think as technology progresses, we have to catch up. But it is scary to know that there is so much fake news.
Even for adults, it's hard to judge.
Yes.
They were talking about a fete at Buckingham Palace yesterday, weren't they?
I have no idea.
Yes, it was. It came up with the news.
Okay.
A lot of people, a lot of fake news came out, and there was apparently a fete of some sort or something going on for the public to come into Buckingham Palace, and nice picture, Christmas fete. So there was loads of people on, I don't know, TikTok or something, turning up suddenly to realise it was just
somebody's joke.
Fake news.
Fake news. With leadership in schools can be both inspiring and isolating. How did you manage to balance the both and support your own well-being and the well-being of your staff?
Your staff are your priority as well as your pupils.
Okay.
So as a leader, as a head, you need to look after your staff as best you can. Now, when I was head, actually, the idea of looking after yourself wasn't really in vogue. So it was a case of, well, as a head, you just get on with it. And so this idea of sort of mentoring heads and making sure, they don't have breakdowns and all sort of thing wasn't really. There was an internal network. So as heads, when I got appointed as a head, I was given a mentor head, another local head, to try and look after me. And then I had a lovely situation. I had 2 phone calls on the morning I became head. One of them was from other local secondary head, who said, if ever you feel as though, you want to do something desperate, just give me a call, because I've been there, and, just give me everything. And then one of the primary heads rang up and said, well done. I don't know how you'll survive, but if you feel like having a quiet morning or something, come round and see us. It might help you out. So it was people realising that you need to support each other. So that was the extent of the support.
Oh gosh. But I suppose that's beautiful, because it, in some ways, that there was at least a little bit and a bit of community support amongst the heads.
Oh yeah.
And they could look after each other a little bit.
It was informal, but it worked. Yeah.
So is there now formalised support for head teachers?
Well, yes. I mean, it's much more about, as we know, sort of mental health. So there is the governors of the school are meant to ensure that the mental health of the head is much more upfront, that they do have time to think and manage their time properly and don't get overloaded. They will get overloaded, but it's just managing that process.
I imagine there's so much on your head, excuse the pun, but you're responsible for so many children and their well-being, and so many staff and a whole school. It's a lot.
Well, the job is just, for all heads, it's just like 24 hour, 7 days a week, really, even when you are on holiday. So trying to break that commitment to, worried about this pupil. Are they, do they need a referral? I'm worried about that member of staff. Do they need referral? That overload is there, but I think it's just a case of managing it and then finding time to break off and give yourself time to think as well.
Do you think that happens enough? Or
there are 1 or 2 people. I think if you're the type of person to hide your stress, to pretend everything's okay, then I think it's a sort of job where you could get into difficulties. If you, as a person, admit that this overload will be there and are willing to share, then I think you're okay. So I think it's for those people who try and who are insular in their approach, I think might find it difficult.
Do you think that's the same also on a teaching level as well? When you're employing people, that's something to
exactly. Yes. I mean, the same applies to a classroom teacher,
Yeah.
whatever level it is, exactly the same applies. So when you're looking about mental health and well-being, then you'd apply the same principles to the class teacher.
So with school culture, it can make or break the learning environment. What do you think are the key ingredients of building a truly positive and inclusive culture at school?
Having a clear vision, I think, is important for everybody, not just the head, but for all the staff, for the pupils. You mentioned Alice Keeble there, and I'm sure she has a very clear vision that she's trying to impart all the time to make sure that. But also, we mentioned in the first time I spoke to you about Catholic education and state education. Catholic education has an advantage in that the idea of Catholic social teaching is very much embedded in the way we approach things about looking after each other, thinking about others, charity work and all that sort of thing. And those are vehicles to help build community and give clear vision as to developing the person and who they are. In state schools, it applies, but in a slightly different way in that often state schools talk about the common good, which is a very slightly more secular approach, which is still very important. And it is about the common good and the importance of community and supporting each other and thinking of those less well off. So both of those help give a clearer vision, I think.
So I guess the school has to see itself as a big community and a big family for it to thrive, in theory, that kind of thing. As in, would you agree with that? Or is that
it is. Yeah. What you used to say, there's no community without commitment. And I think that's a good reminder that everybody needs to commit to the idea of community in order for it to happen. And if the kids invest in it and the staff and the parents invest in it, then it'll be a lot more successful.
Is it hard to get the parents to invest in it?
It can be, but I think I've got to be sympathetic to parents in that. I think trying to provide a roof over your head, enough money coming in, and some sort of stability is a hard job. Gone are the days where one parent could work and bring enough money in. I think it's often two parents working. For those who are not in well-paid jobs, it can be long hours. And therefore, there are conflicts for parents about the amount of time they can invest in the school community, and how they can take part. So we've got to bear that in mind, that it's not easy necessarily being a parent, but at the same time, I think it can work. If parents are willing to try and find some time to invest in their child's education, I think it can pay good dividends for them.
I recently did an early years thing, again, going back to that, but I found it really interesting that they were talking about the back and forth with your 0 to 5-year-old. But as we're talking, I realized there's a back and forth that almost is lifelong. So that back and forth of getting a little bit involved in the education helps your child strengthen their view on education and also makes the experience positive. And part of my thinking is that this podcast is that little bit of extra information to encourage parents, if they can, to put in a little bit more into finding out a bit more about their schools, what's going on, so that we can feel empowered to get more involved. Because I feel more involved, it's a good thing all around. I feel that way.
Yeah, I think you're right. Education is lifelong.
Yes.
And it seems a bit trite to say that, but it's true. Education, I am still now learning every day of my life, and I learn something, hopefully, for the positive every day. You learn from mistakes you make, and the more that you can learn every day, or the more you can realise that you're learning every day, the better it becomes. And from that point of view, I think it's good for anybody listening here if you can, consider the idea of volunteering in your school, or not necessarily your school, especially if you're a parent. Consider volunteering maybe as a governor in a local school. You can not only you're continuing your education and learning, you learn how schools run and begin to understand the pressures on the pupils, the parents, and the governors. And I think that's a good opportunity and every adult has a lot of experience themselves at work, and people have a lot to offer. Maybe if you're offering as a governor to your own child's school, there can be some conflicts of interest. So apart from being a parent governor, of course. So I think it's a good idea maybe just look at a local school and maybe try and, through the local authority, offer your services.
For those of us who may not know exactly what a governor is, could you tell us what a governor is and what their role is in a school? I know there's lots of different roles. It's not quite, if you're governor, this is what you do, and it's not one stamp fits all. It's quite flexible, is it not, in some ways?
Governors obviously offer their skills. So it may well be that you have a background in human resources, or you might be actually running a small business, so you'd have some good finance background. It may well be that you're involved in doing local architecture, building, management of people. There's lots of jobs that people have that can contribute to the idea of being a governor. So governance is all about trying to make sure that the structure of the school is sound, so that the school has good sound policies, that it has a good financial background, that there are good safeguarding procedures and routines in there to make sure everybody's safe, that there is good procedures for appointing staff, that there is good routines for making sure the building stays in one piece, that the insurance is properly up to date, and all those sorts of things. So it is much more structural rather than piecemeal. So, and you can actually offer, and you are meant to be a critical friend to the school, so you can raise questions without feeling as though you're just pointing at somebody. You're saying, why do we do so and so and so and so? Or could we not perhaps utilise the outside playgrounds a bit better? Or could we get a few more after-school clubs? There's sorts of questions which can help build the community.
Is it something that demands a lot of your time, or is it something that is
How
easy?
long's a bit of string? Yeah.
Oh no, I didn't know whether is it so many hours, or is there a lot of training? I know you have to apply. You can apply through a school, or you can apply to the council.
That's right. Yeah. Now, I suppose the structure for meetings is there's one main meeting a term. There'll be at least another one or two meetings, one for finance, maybe one for buildings and structures, one for staffing, where you don't have to get involved in all of them. So you might get an area to concentrate on. It will involve some sort of visit to the schools. Again, maybe once a term would be quite good. You might feel interested in going to the odd Christmas event or Easter event or something like that, or the summer games. The sports day. So yes, but you don't have to get over involved, but certainly taking interest in what's going on is a requirement. Yeah.
So realistically, it is something that you can fit into your working life.
A lot of large scale employers do offer time off.
Okay.
So I know, for instance, banks, civil service, lots of other large organisations will offer you, sort of an afternoon once a term to go off and visit the school or attend a meeting. And that helps them because they need to show that they're committing or contributing to community. And obviously it helps you because then there's no conflict of you missing work or work time.
I learned something new because I didn't realise that some jobs would allow you to actively be part of the community in a good way like that.
There's an emphasis now on large organisations to provide some sort of payback, whether it be charity work. You might see some, for instance, a local insurance firm, suddenly people doing fundraising for charity. Well, that is part of their payback. So it's sort of, it's expected, I think, of many organisations, especially the larger ones that have got a bit of flexibility. It's different if you're a very small setup, and there are cost pressures involved there.
It's really lovely to try and encourage people to get more involved in our school life. And I hadn't thought of that idea that you could go and be part of another school and add to their community instead of being part of your school, if it was to perhaps cause that bit of conflict of interest when big decisions have to be made that don't sit well with you.
Yeah, sometimes difficult decisions might have to be made. There is a national problem at the moment with schools in that there's falling roles, there's falling numbers across the board, across the country. There are fewer children being born, and those numbers are being reflected in smaller numbers in schools. Schools are funded by the number of children you have in them. So if you only have, shall we say, you're a one form entry primary, instead of having 210 in the school, you only have 200. That's 5% less funding you have. So that does cause stress. Now, if that is an issue, every school is facing as we speak.
So what happens if you're continually underfunded?
By law, you are asked to balance the budget. So you're given a budget, and they're saying, well, that's what you've got to spend, and about 85% of your budget is staffing. Obviously, you invest in staffing, and that means the first area of cutback will be people, because they're the most expensive and it's the biggest element of your budget.
So in an average class, how many students do you have? It's about what's considered fully funded, may I ask?
Okay, so fully funded would be, should we say, just as an example, it's 30 children in a primary school classroom, and most probably 30 children in a secondary, but actually because of sixth form funding and older funding, sixth forms most probably funded about 1 to 16 in post 16 funding. So in trying to, if you're below that, then you'll begin to feel the effect.
Okay, and how often can you be? So if we have 29 students enroll, we're underfunded by one, and then that we have the same thing happen the next year where we have maybe 2, how many years can that, what can a school do? How do you balance that? How do you recover from that?
So the funding is done in arrears, if you like. So you do get, there's a small time lag, and but the main thing is, like the governors would do, you would have a 3-year or 5-year projection on funding and funding numbers. So it used to be, when I was head, the local authority used to supply expected outturn of numbers using the birth rate, NHS figures for the birth rate through, so you could see the number of children going into school at years 4 and 5, age 4 and 5, and then obviously I would then think, okay, 6 or 7 years later, they'll be coming to me. So we would use spreadsheets to actually look at, so we would actually get about 5 or 6 years advance notice as what's going on. I'm not sure how efficient that's done these days. It was just one of those things we used to do, which was very useful. But certainly you get notice of it, but you have to plan for that difficulty. So it's no use leaving it till it's a crisis. You need to look at your figures. And again, each year you have to balance your budget. So it's quite a challenge.
Can a school say, we know that in so many years we're only going to have 29 pupils? Can they apply and say, look, we're never going to fill this. Can we be now considered? Can we make us smaller? Can that happen? Can you reduce the school?
So, for instance, if say you're a primary school and you are a 2-form entry, so you have 60 children a year, it may well be that you're thinking, well, actually, I think the year after next, we're going to have to apply to become a 1-form entry from year R upwards. Okay. So, and as you shrink your funding, and obviously you'll be able to plan for that. And the same for secondary schools. You might be a sixth form entry, typical secondary school, and because of the numbers, you might say, we're going to have to reduce to 5 form entry for 4 years, and then maybe even a 4 form entry. And so looking ahead, try and balance it up. The problem comes when you have many schools are 1 form entry, so typically 210 if you're full. And if the numbers are being reduced there, you get all the cost pressures, but none of the advantages of being able to shrink easily.
Oh, okay.
I know some schools that, especially country schools, that share classrooms. So the children are taught in years, in groups. So years 5 and 6 are taught together. I know in New Zealand, I went to a country school and they only had 2 classrooms, and the years 4, 5 and 6 were taught together. 1, 2 and 3 were taught together.
Okay.
And both of those classes were less than 30. I think it was only about 26 in one and about 24 in the other. A real country school, and the teachers had to adapt to teaching across a wide range of ability. So it was quite a challenge for them.
Would you say that with that, how was that when you were ahead? Did you have that worry when you saw the numbers, or was it quite steady?
I was lucky. It was steady.
Okay.
So, in fact, we grew, but only marginally. We were already a 6th form entry, but it was the 6th form that grew, so it was good. So, again, 6th forms have to balance their budget, and you need an optimum number there. So schools with large 6th forms, generally speaking, are much more stable.
Okay, so is 6th form treated as a slightly separate entity to the main?
It's a different funding formula.
Okay.
Mainly because you're teaching smaller classes to different levels. It's one of those challenges that once you got used to it, you instinctively know what the optimum numbers are. So, for instance, you do find schools that have dropping numbers saying, we're going to have to drop one of the languages because we've only got 6 doing Spanish, only got 8 doing German. They are just not viable. The cost of supplying that teacher to teach that is most probably twice as much as the money we're getting in.
So with the birth rates becoming lower as we go forward, and I think homeschooling becoming something that people seem to be enjoying, are schools going to be okay? Do you think, in your opinion? I feel a bit like, how are they going to survive if both these things are happening in correlation in a way?
Homeschooling is an interesting topic. In fact, most probably could do a completely separate session on that. And in fact, I think it would be a really interesting one for you to do, because it's a complete unknown and it's very dependent on the ability and the experience of the parents in what they provide, how they teach, and what experiences they are giving their children. The only disadvantage which I feel exists with homeschooling, if you, for instance, are a qualified teacher who happens to be working at home and you're providing homeschooling for children and you understand the national curriculum, etc., then the ingredients for that education must probably sound. But the social skills and social interaction for the child is another area they need to consider, which is very important. And I think that's the challenge.
Yeah, I suppose it's really hard for parents, because when you meet people who've chosen to homeschool, they'll say things like, our school was meeting the needs of our child, so we felt we could provide a better balance for them. And I think there's also a little rise in people hiring tutors. So they're technically homeschooling, but actually they're hiring a tutor to do the academic side of things. It is an unknown for me. I'm learning as I go along, doing this a little bit about it.
To me, it's not the challenge of providing the actual teaching of a curriculum.
Yeah.
It is the social skills that you learn when you're at school. So you meet some not very nice people, don't you? You meet some lovely people and you meet different people. Everybody is unique. So you get every personality and that broadens you as a person. So how you do that when you're homeschooling, I would like to learn a bit more myself. I'd like to educate myself about homeschooling,
I suppose,
because I do understand that some children's needs in a larger, bigger environment, surrounded by lots of children, they are unhappy or they feel stressed, and I can understand that, and I can understand why people would say, I've got to take my child out and provide a quieter, better learning environment. but they've still got that challenge of that social interaction. So I'd like to learn more myself.
I suppose school is more than just the classes, isn't it? It's us finding our way of learning how to be almost in a workplace, because in a workplace you'll meet the lovely people, the not so lovely people, and the different people. And you know, so you have to learn to relate to people. So you're right, the social side.
COVID taught us that, of course, as well.
Yeah. And I think COVID taught us that we need each other as much as we can survive on our own. We need each other. You know, people need to be able to see each other and be in proximity of each other.
That's right. Yeah.
When you look at our educational system, is there anything that you would like to redesign if you had that power? What would you change and why?
I don't propose to have any big answers, other than the fact that I think creativity is an undervalued and unexplored element of education they should invest more time and effort into creativity. We always saying, England, you know, great inventors and all this sort of thing. Embedding creativity in teaching can be done at all subject levels and not just the arts. But at the same time, the national curriculum has put undue stress on the arts. And I do think they're undervalued myself, because I think there is a huge amount of value to be found in art, music and drama, as there's just 3 examples. And for mental health issues as well. Yeah. I think there's a lot of youngsters who find actually the opportunity for drama outlet fantastic, who need that time for expression and exploration. So creativity, I think, is one area. And then we mentioned this earlier about fake news and information overload, the idea of critical thinking, critical awareness, being able to make judgments about what is true, what is good, what is bad, what is helpful, what is unhelpful. And I'd like to see, I remember actually in our 6th form we had 2 courses. One was called Search for Meaning, which was a morality-based course. Again, with the idea of thinking about moral issues in the world, and then we did AS level critical thinking, which is a fantastic AS level to have being taught alongside, because it makes you think much more critically about everything that's been spoken to you, and it makes a massive difference to have somebody teaching critical thinking. If that was available, be good.
I suppose getting people and children to actually question what they're being told and how to look at it from different perspectives. Yes, that's critical thinking, I suppose? Or is it more?
It's the ability to understand when somebody's giving you an argument as to whether the argument is a sound argument or it's just a bit of clickbait. And it's just, I mean, there's huge amounts of clickbait, as I call it, in the world. Somebody's interesting you in something and then they pull you off and the logic isn't there. There's no backup to the thought process at all. And a lot of the information that children and adults are experiencing these days is really to capture your information. It's they want your email address. They want to find out what you might buy. So they'll have some headline that's heavy snow coming or something on your phone, and you think, click on that, and actually you suddenly see, that's what am I looking at? I'm not looking at a snow forecast. I'm looking at something else. There's a lot of that around.
I suppose it's that, like you said, because clicks are financially, it's how people get their money, so they need you to click on them. And it is that strange manipulation that happens. They wean you in, but it's not for the right reasons. So would you make those mandatory in every 6th form, those 2?
Well, I would say it's a bit much to say mandatory, because to find a teacher skilled enough to do critical thinking would be a challenge in itself. Okay. But there's accessible courses on critical thinking, and I would encourage actually all teachers, whatever subject they're teaching, to try and involve this idea of being critical about what you're seeing, what you're listening to, what impressions you have, and it can be very powerful if you can build that in
I suppose it also helps build your identity as a child or a young person, because it makes you think further than following everybody. It encourages you to have your own opinion.
Independent thinking.
Yes, independent thinking. Because I think with the internet, people like to follow trends, and it can escalate.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to, this idea of, are you one of the sheep that just, wanders around in the flock following whoever happens to be at the front, and just following what everybody else is saying? And I think there is that culture, there is that peer group pressure for every youngster to be part of what everybody else is saying, to agreeing with everything. Whereas sometimes it's good just to say, well, actually, I don't agree with that at all.
Takes courage.
And that's people growing up, I think. Youngsters beginning to grow up and saying, no, I don't agree with that, actually.
A summary of our conversation. When you reflect back on your career and education and where you see it now, where it's going, what would be the key points that stick out to you? I
think now, looking back, my experiences now involved in education is much more strategic. So it's looking at the strategies that we're adopting to ensure that we get a good education system that's well funded and properly looked after. I mean, there's talk now already, and shortly coming out into next year, there's the revised national curriculum coming out. So we will see that as we come around, most probably Easter time. It'd be interesting to see what the revisions are, whether we could just do without political interference, we could do without people saying that we should bring 1950s grammar back like Michael Gove did, which hasn't really been terribly helpful. It's still a bit of a focus in the national curriculum, but I don't think it's I wouldn't call it a peak of learning for pupils. The idea of trying to look ahead and trying to anticipate what these pressures are. So, for instance, looking ahead with the idea of AI and information overload, the idea of truth. What is truth? Pontius Pilate said, and it's still most probably a good quote. What is truth? And for politicians, it's whatever they want to say is truth. Whereas for most of us, it is actually something else. And trying to make sure that's embedded in our teaching is important. So if you could give one piece of advice to head teachers or aspiring head teachers out there, what would it be? I would say just be yourself, be your genuine self, set an example, be prepared to be the one that does the right thing for the future. When we are looking to appoint head teachers, like in the MAT, and I've appointed 3, I think, so far in the last couple of years. So, I appointed. I was part of the panel. We're looking for good communicators, people who are genuine, people who have vision, people who are good communicators, good at multitasking, because that's what you'll end up doing, and that they have embedded values for both their pupils and their staff. I think it is a tough role. It sounds like it's quite a tough role, but very rewarding. Yeah, but you find people who step up, see them stepping into the role and thinking they're going to do a good job here. And I think most head teachers are very passionate. They're passionate about their pupils. They're passionate about their school. They're passionate about their vision of what they can take a school, which I think is exciting for parents to know that it's not a role people, take lightly, and they will always do it to their best ability, which is... They've got to be brave in their approach, I think. Oh, thank you so much, Frank, for joining me today. It has been an absolute pleasure to chat with you. I hope you come back again. Well, thank you, and I don't know what I'll be talking about. No, but thank you so much. Cheers. Thank you for joining us on today's episode, and we truly appreciate you listening. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, subscribe, and follow to stay updated on future episodes. We look forward to seeing you next week.